Hey, excuse me. I think we'll get started here if they come late. Well, the people come late. Welcome, everyone, to the very first GM panel that we're having here at Dragon. Yay. And for all the people who are GMs and are gonna be like talking in this panel, feel free to introduce yourselves. I don't know what the order is. I don't know what order. Just try to introduce yourselves, I suppose.
Hello.
I suppose just say your name and how long you've been DMing.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out if you can hear me. That's the first thing.
Oh, I can hear you. Yes, you're fine. You're coming in through like a little bit choppy, but you're fine.
Mhm. Okay. All right. um, my name is Jason. I've been a DM for Dragon for 2 years now. Pronouns he, him. Uh, and I'm excited to get started.
I suppose I can go next. Hello, my name is Merrick, club president, etc., etc. I've been GMing for, I suppose it'll be 4 years now. Um, Mostly just like, some high school stuff and whatever into college, which I think my like officially I started at Dragon last year. It's like officially like real DMing actual D&D games that went well. So, so yeah, that's my experience. I'm happy to help today.
My name is Jacob Walker. I'm a little sick, so my voice may be kind of strange. I've been GMing for 4 or 5 years. Um, I think I've been running some like summer programs at a local game store back in Berkeley as a job. So that's where most of my experiences come from. But I've been playing many different kinds of role-playing games for about 12, 13 years at this point.
Jojo, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm a recently new DM. I've only been GMing for about 6 months now, but I've been in the game for about 3 years.
I suppose I could technically also join in since I have started DMing since last year, but really only one campaign so far, so I'm a comparatively new one. Well, it seems to be getting awkward. It's okay. Is your mic working, Barry, or is something up, or
It definitely seems more like on the computer side since. Oh,
oh, well, I suppose either way, we should just continue since introductions are clearly just kind of going a bit awkward, but that's okay. We'll start with, so basically how this is going to work, we're going to start with like a few basic questions that we had prepared beforehand, and then we'll leave basically about the second half of this as just opening up questions to whatever. Feel free to put them in the chat early or whatever, and we'll see how we can respond, and we'll try to record everything. So, very first thing, what do I need to get started as a GM? What do you guys think?
I mean, the most basic, you just start doing it. I suppose a player, but nowadays with the single player RPGs, even that isn't totally necessary.
usually game rules. I mean, some people go with 5e nowadays, but there's also Pathfinder. There's a whole bunch of different like D&D types of games. It's just really good to familiarize yourself with those rules so you know what you're playing with.
Absolutely. I really agree with that. I've looked into like some like old school style systems. I've been getting really into that recently. And I've noticed that there can be a really good introduction for newer players because of like the more rules light and creativity heavy kind of bent that they tend to have. So finding a system that works best for you is really good, but I think at the very basic, you just have to start doing it, even if it's scary or you're not really sure if you're going to do it right. The more you do it, the more mistakes you make, the more you're going to learn. So
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that, a lot of the like, especially like in like older modules and stuff, you get a lot of the pre-made adventures and that kind of stuff. And I think those can be very useful. But a buddy of mine actually before this event, he basically, texted back and forth. He's like, why do you even need a GM panel? Just tell them to make stuff up and like go from there. Because like honestly, I mean, I really started enjoying like DMing running games when I started just like home brewing as it's called. But it's like, if you don't necessarily like a rule or like how something is, you can just change it. And sure, it may not be the best all the time, but part of the learning process is knowing when you change things and it's not cool and you got to change it back. So yeah, experiment. That's what I like to say.
Definitely, I agree. There really isn't much you really need to get started outside of like maybe having like a basic plan of like how you want to get this session started, and then everything from there. If you plan something, it's not going to work sometimes, because sometimes the players just want to take you off into some other random direction, and you never know what happens.
And I will say,
Yeah.
as a specific thing, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is the current hotness, but it is not a rules light RPG. If the idea of memorizing the rules is an intimidating stumbling block, there are lots of things you can do that are a bit easier to get off the ground.
Definitely. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What are some good hooks for the first session? Like, I know this very standard thing is everyone meets in a tavern and starts talking to each other, but like, what are some other good things that you guys like to do to start off like a first session?
I mean, that's your classic hook, though. But at the same time, it's important. Usually, most new players and even experienced players, they really do want something to drive the story forward. So it's kind of up to the GM to basically say, hey, like introduce some sort of character to, or some. Usually, it's called like a patron, to basically push those your players into a story. So it could be again the barkeep needing help with collecting some ingredients, or it could get into more dangerous stuff where it's like, oh, we need help protecting the town from night wolves and things like that. They're hiring you. Classic.
I like to get started by making the players do my work. So, in that, like,
Sorry, it's okay. Go ahead.
sorry, if your idea for the first thing is like that you're going to explore a ruin, that's kind of what you've got planned. I sometimes start by telling the players, for some reason you've come together, you're at this ruin. Now you tell me, what was your motivation for being here? What made you agree to work with all these random jerks and put your life on the line together? That being said, I did start a campaign once by just telling them their airship had exploded. They were falling several miles down. And how did we get to this place?
Um, sorry. I think another good thing is to offer your players, especially for a first session, giving them a lot of space to really mess around. Especially if you have new players. I think a lot of new players are really sort of enamored with the idea of, oh, I can actually do anything, essentially, in a way that's extremely different from, video game RPGs. Dungeons and Dragons, you can really just kind of like do whatever you want. And so giving your players like an environment where they can have a lot of options to do that Like, I think rule number one is if you put a fighting pit anywhere, like, your players will engage with it because they will love the opportunity to mess around. And so I think for a first session, giving them like the opportunity to get it out of their systems to some extent is really good.
In a more general
I-
sense, like an opportunity to interact with the rules.
That's a good point, actually. That's a really good point. I'd like to also say that interacting with the rules is really important, especially for a first session. Oh my god, because you do not want like the second or third session people not knowing like how movement works or like how an attack works. It's never good. It frustrates everybody. However, I have noticed, I don't know, maybe I just run like really large games, but it's kind of hard to have the first session be like super open, just like do whatever you want, because I feel like a lot of people, honestly, what I really get is like one or two people in the group driving everybody to like one place, even if they don't necessarily want to everyone else. It's just like these are the loudest people, so they're doing that. So my first sessions, I like to start them off spicy. I give them like a lot of narrative tension, a lot of stuff going on. I had for the first one, they got marooned because their ship was taken by pirates. So the pirates took them and just left them on an island somewhere because there was a big thing going on. But that was fun. And the one recently, they were on in a caravan with some carriages and stuff, and they were going along the road, and they got ambushed, and everything was destroyed and burned, and everyone was like sad and running away, and it was scary. It was great. It went really well. But yeah, those are some ideas.
I really agree with the idea of like having some kind of combat or action in the first session. Not only to teach the rules, but this is more of like, I guess, a personal preference. So it might not work for everybody, but I think part of making a compelling hook is trying to get some sort of like action or tension right off the bat. And while your story might be able to later on achieve that sort of thing, you're kind of guaranteed some kind of narrative tension with even a pretty basic combat. So I personally like to put it in wherever I can for first. I mean, I have a lot of experience running with like younger kids, so maybe like the 11 to 15 range. And definitely from experience, if you can put a little bit of combat in, they appreciate it. They're going to be more on board. They're going to be more excited about the second session. So I think one memory I have of creating that sort of thing is there was a module, Sailors from the Starless Sea, where you have to get the players to be assaulting this keep or investigating this keep where there's a bunch of these beastmen who are stealing people from a nearby village. So you have the players walk into a village while the beastmen are raiding it, and they see all like the problems that it's causing. So you get like a very clear, direct sign of what's going on. Maybe townspeople can offer payment, and also their lives are in danger. They need to help fight off the beastmen and get some kind of reputation. So that sort of thing would be my thought process.
Very nice. It's just really you want to bring like the characters all together for whatever reason. Like for me, I did the lemon one shot. So basically everyone was just lining up, really wanting these lemon bars at this one shop, and then it got attacked. Oh no, they all have a reason to fight the goblins or hobgoblins that are just running out of that shop because they want their lemons. They want their lemon bars. If the guy cannot have his lemons, then he's not going to be able to make their wonderful lemon bars. So really anything. It doesn't have to be limited to, of course, like the classic bar or anything. Okay, moving on to the next one. What are some helpful GM screen things or just general information to keep on hand? I know not everyone like has a GM screen or anything, but sometimes it's nice to have just like some information just to keep on the side. What would that be?
I'd recommend trying to think of the rules that you're most likely to forget, or the things that are most complicated. So if there's a system that's like just very kind of granular, I play Pathfinder a lot. There's many things in that system that are like you kind of have to know it or you don't. And having a shorthand of a bunch of charts can be really good. Yeah, I think that's basically it.
I have a good reason for being late, I swear.
No, it's all right. Just feel free to join in.
Hey, frosted your phone. It's very attractive.
Yep. Screen no longer turns on. Great.
No.
So I had to go tell my parents how they could reach me. Anyway,
Anyways,
yeah,
just to catch you up, we're on useful GM screen things and useful information just to keep on hand on the side.
my number one is if I'm playing with players that are new and I'm giving up pre-gens, I have all the pre-gens behind the GM screen all times. Another common thing that I'm always having to look up is how much does a normal healing potion heal?
Mhm.
I'd say those are like my top two that are like system independent.
I was thinking this through.
Uh,
I'm not one that.
I will. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, you go on. I went first last time.
Okay. Thank you. I will say, as someone who runs a very roleplay heavy campaign, something I'm always coming across is like how much stuff costs. So if you can have like a quick list of like common items that your players are likely to buy, because oftentimes you'll have moments where it's just like, oh, I buy this beer, and then you have to quickly think of like, I have to charge you for that. So how much? Like having a shorthand for things like that is really helpful, as well as names. Not even just a lot of people suggest like having a list of names already written down in advance, which can be helpful. I sometimes forget to check it, so that's a varying use to me. But just like NPCs that you, uh, especially if you have a lot of NPCs, having like your NPCs listed down and like their basic goals and motivations can be helpful. Just something you can check very quickly.
Yeah, I'm one that I don't really use a lot of GM screens, but thinking about one thing that you do try to keep on hand is like a list of the characters, any close relations to them, and also maybe a list of plot points that I want to bring in or things that I know will motivate them. If one player is always looking for mushrooms, one player is really motivated by anything about the old religious war, just have notes of that so I know that what threads I can quickly pull to get things moving. And also being able to drop the names of their like friends and family. What was it? Secrets of never mind. But someone said that the most beautiful sound that someone can hear is their own name.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It's always important to have just kind of like basic paper and pencil beside you to write down notes of the session, perhaps maybe some initiative tracker or something like that, just an open pad for you to write down stuff. But usually before the game, you're writing down plot points from pretty much what you've collected so far, or perhaps what the player wants you to acknowledge, like you were saying, the most beautiful thing, their name. It's so important as a player. I mean, think back to it as a player, you being a GM, you want to make sure the player has a good time. And since you've played Dungeons and Dragons before, or at least I hope you have, but if you have, then you know what you want from a GM. So just go for that.
Also on the track initiative side of things, I have advice for that, and that's write down on index cards all of your creatures with their initiative, and then just slide in the initiative and build it out with the index cards. You could even have them stand up like so or whatever, and then have players mark the damage on the index card themselves. Because that way, when you know if it ever exceeds their max HP, it dies. And then it's less for the GM to track, and you put more of that onto the player so that you have less numbers in your head.
Yeah, I'll let you go,
no, you
Jacob.
got it. Are you sure?
I'll take it. Fine. Oh, wait.
You go.
I'll go. Got it. Nice. Cool. Okay. Initiative counting. Oh God, it's such a pain. I feel like there's a lot of like I'm gonna take this from the angle of how can you minimize the amount of pain you're going through during a game. Because that is like personally, I have some problems, especially like I stopped doing large encounters because I just like can't do it. Like I literally cannot have like all of the people like tracked in my head of where they are, what they're doing, like all this kind of stuff. Especially with intelligent monsters, there's no way. So I kind of stopped doing that. But like besides that, on the specifically the GM screen side of things, Blackboard initiative is usually good. You can like having something to easily erase to like write down, like little things during the game, like doo-doo-doo. But my most important thing is I have a write-up of everything I'm doing in the game on one page before the game starts. And that's how like everything that's going to happen during the game is already written down. I have page numbers for all the monsters. I have like everything that like, and it's not like comprehensive, but everything that I see myself needing to have to reference, it's all there already. So that when I'm in the game, I can kind of just look down and be like, ooh, man, I totally forgot about this. But it's like, oh, page number here, boom, go there, got it. So so yeah, write-ups are fun. Make sure you're prepared, at least a little bit.
Okay, slightly out of the box take for doing initiative. But if there are like alternatives for cutting down on like a lot of the pain that initiative can cause that I've started doing just for like sake of speed. Where you can actually just do like consider or play around with the ideas of like a side-based initiative where your players act and then your monsters act. If your players are all trying to act at once, go around the table and ask them what they're doing, and then have an internal idea of like how monsters would react to whatever they are. I mean, intelligent creatures are kind of tricky. If it's dogs or something, this is pretty straightforward. So I've noticed that it speeds up my game a lot and it takes so much pressure off of me. So I'd recommend just trying it. Another alternative is just not so much side-based initiative, but you just ask players to kind of go one at a time around the table and then maybe switch it up. You start on like a different side every now and then. I think it allows more room for like it allows more breathing room and less tracking on your part. And it also opens up maybe if it makes this is kind of funny, but it makes combo moves a little bit easier to do in a combat because normally for initiative, a player would like, oh, I have to hold my action, wait for this person to get here, pass out this thing, and then we can do it together. If you're doing side-based initiative, these players act at once and they do the same thing and they make their rolls together. So it streamlines some parts of the game. It's worth trying out.
Yeah, I think that there are some systems that actually do that very well. I just don't think D&D is one of them. Because I think that side-based initiative actually you lose a lot because then for example, burst damage builds become a lot more impactful. And I tend to run a more lethal game and I'm running in Pathfinder. And Pathfinder has some very, very gross burst damage builds, even in 2e, where a lot of stuff is more tightly balanced. Because if you have something like our Magus or a 5e Paladin come in and immediately smite a bad guy and remove them from initiative, your encounter just went down difficulty tier by itself. So side-based initiative has issues on that front. And so I don't want a GM to just come in and think, oh yeah, I should just use side-based initiative. Depending on how your players are, and if you have a player that is building a very powerful character, side initiative can very much affect the balance of the game in a major way.
Okay, that was a really wonderful discussion there. Next up is any super useful like websites or general resources for literally anything that you like to use as a DM. For me, I'll just start off. For me, I actually really like Kobold Fight Club because as a new DM, I'm like, I have no idea how to balance encounters. So I literally just use it to kind of help me see like, okay, for this many players at this level, like roughly what kind of danger level is that? So that is something that I like to reference sometimes when building encounters.
For me, you will not catch me running a Pathfinder session without 5 tabs of Archives of Nethys open. It's a thing. It has all the rules, all the monsters, all the feats, everything. So I could just look up on Archives of Nethys, it'll be there. That's like the thing I have 5 tabs open of whenever I'm running.
You also maybe want to be careful of D20 PFSRD if you're running 4th edition Pathfinder. It throws in third-party materials alongside
Yes.
like actual like rules as written. So if you can parse it, the site can sometimes be a little easier to look at, but other than that, Archives is probably the way to go.
And Archives has a really, really good layout and accessibility options for 2e specifically. I know their 1e site is a little bit further behind technology, but for Pathfinder 2, it's great.
As a more general resource, I think RPGNet is still, or RPG.net is still probably the most useful RPG website, especially for more obscure systems. You can ask just about anything there and get an answer.
Just an obligatory shout out to Fantasy name generator. You'll use that so often. Or you'll have like the player's handbook open. It just like, I need a name for this dwarf that doesn't sound awful. The player's handbook is so good for that. All the names that they have listed there are great for like, I need an NPC name stat that's not gonna sound ridiculous. Because I think sometimes you run into the problem of names that immediately undermine how serious a character is supposed.
Am I the only one that Jason's cutting up for? Or
Nope, he's dead.
okay.
I'm afraid, yeah.
He will be missed.
I guess
Oh,
kind of
he's
continuing
coming-
his
he's come
point.
back.
We
Oh,
screen's
Oh.
moving.
God.
I was going to say that if you leave me to make up an NPC name on the fly, I'll use a celebrity and not realize I'm doing it. Just be like Vincent Price. And then, yeah, that totally just kills the mood.
Yeah.
I got the same issue.
For me,
Yeah.
it's
Might have
There-
5 Jerrys running around in one game, and I'm like, okay, can't do that.
true. It's very hard to come up with fantasy sounding names. You can come up with real common names pretty easily a lot of the time. If you have female character, go Sarah, whatever. But come up with a female fantasy name. That's so much harder.
One thing I've done is, depending on where my players are most likely to end up in a given session, I'll just like write out a list of like 5 to 10 names, with either ambiguous or like alternating gender, just so I can like throw them on, and I'll throw them in and I'll cross them off, and at the end of the session I can write some notes about them. So food for thought.
I think that's a sweet system.
Something that I do, sorry, I had work, so I had to jump on late. Is it possible? Should I turn on my camera?
No, go
or-
ahead. Just do whatever you want.
Do whatever makes you
Thanks.
comfortable.
Well, I'm eating right now. I don't think anyone wants to see that. Something that I do is that even though this takes a while, I form like a name bank with a bunch of stuff that I read. I read a lot of old books. So like right now I'm reading Beowulf for a class. So I'm Hrothgar, Welpathau, like all of these weird sounding names. Honestly, if you can just look up old English names, all of those are really good. You can find like Saruman, Pericles. That's not old English. I'm trying to think of Apollonius, stuff like that. If you can build up that name bank, I put in the chat. I use behind the name because then you can tailor. It has a lot of different settings, and then you can generate like first, middle, last name. Tailor the gender that you want. It works really well. Something else that I just discovered also is that you don't have to get World Anvil, but World Anvil, a lot of people will post and organize modules on World Anvil. So you can just jump in, have all of a button, like a setup and note organization system from someone else, steal that format or base your own off of it. And also it's fun to look at other people's D&D games sometimes. So that's something I've discovered.
Cool. So, next question. What does session prep look like for each of you?
A frantic 3-hour session of writing down everything. Okay, but seriously, usually sometimes I'll find like spurts of inspiration throughout the week, and I'll just kind of quickly jot down notes of what that is. Typically, a lot of it comes like right after the session. So after the session, I'm like, okay, that just happened. What were some key moments? And I kind of highlight what was important stuff, like NPCs that was pretty notable, you know, who were we fighting, things like that. Did anyone die? Stuff like that. And then throughout the week, I'm like, oh, you know, it would be fun if we go this direction or if we try to go here. And then like the night before, I'll just kind of like draw a map or something, put stuff together, find a playlist, bam, I'm done.
For me, I go extremely light on prep because I can just like put faith in the encounter building math. Haha, it fits on index card. Thank you, Pathfinder. But I can then do that and then just look through the bestiary for what creatures look cool and fit the theme of what I know the next session is going to be. Because usually we do like a session of, okay, so we're around town. We know we need to go explore this rift over there. So what are some creatures that they encounter in the woods? Okay, now they're going to need to go explore this area. So what kind of thing would they find over there? I just kind of get like a quick list of things, and then I can just, based on this math, based on how many players show up, and then I'm basically done combat-wise, and that's all story prep stuff, which is also pretty simple because I like to keep myself a lot open for options, so I just record notes after something so I don't accidentally contradict myself.
I haven't done a bunch of work on super super open or sandboxy type games with like more of a free-flowing narrative, but I've done a lot of stuff for like dungeon crawling. And dungeon crawl prep is usually very like it's very all the prep is very like slanted towards the beginning, where if you want a map, you got to draw out the whole thing, got to get all the details, and in drawing out the map, you kind of like learning where all the rooms are. It's important to if your dungeon has it, it's important to like learn various entrances and exits, and like the ecology, what are the different factions that they might be able to find down there. But once you have all of that, you're gonna kind of see it start to move as the players go through and as they interact with all this stuff. And it's much more player led after that initial kind of learning of how the dungeon works. So it really depends on your game. It for this genre, that might be how it goes.
Oh, I'll let you go first because you should know.
Okay. Sorry. I tend to do sandbox, open-ended kind of campaigns. So for me, what I'll typically do is that I record down important NPCs to characters' backstories that I think they'll encounter. I write down some possible, like really quick one line of dialogue to introduce them so I know what their general vibe is. And then from there, I kind of collect what my players wanted to do from the previous session, write down like very quick, like what that would look like, where they would need to go, what are the important details there. But honestly, that will take me maybe like a few hours throughout the week. I do most of my session prep, like I tend to do it based off of location. So I'll do like months in advance, and then just usually it's like, all right, that's done. Let's see what you guys do. How do you guys mess it up? Or how do you guys fuck with my world?
I always advise people to plan of what happens if the players don't get involved, and then improv based on what they do. You can never predict a player to do something, but you can also prepare for if they do nothing. That is something that they may always choose to do, and that is what you'll likely know the least about. So I always plan for if they do nothing.
Interesting. I mean, like valid, honestly. I feel like there is a lot of that, like I'm gonna call it trauma here, even though that's not the best use of the word. But
You're not
I feel
wrong.
like every GM has had the every experienced GM at least has had the my players decided that the thing that I had planned was boring and lame. And then it's like what do you do? And I'll say my session prep has been, I think like session to session, game to game, my session prep has varied like incredibly wildly. I think it really does matter so much, like the type of thing that you're running. Because like, for instance, like dungeon crawls, like the prep, what's the prep for a dungeon crawl? You draw a map, you draw like, interactions between creatures, like where they are in the map. You like, let's say, I don't know, maybe they move around, maybe the traps like reset or aren't set, like all kinds of stuff, right? So you do all that. It's very intricate, it's very like nice and stuff. Then there's the game that I ran the other day, which was the players going through cornfields, hunting down a demon cow that was rampaging through and eating all the crops. My prep for that was literally a picture of a cow with like demon stuff on it. And I just ran with like the concept of like, oh, it's like a farm area. Like I knew the lore pretty well, my world that I was writing, so like I know what's in the area. So I don't need to do that much prep. I just kind of stat block for a cow. They're gonna find the cow. And I just throw in random stuff as it goes along. Because it keeps them interested, Like I feel like people really can see when you do improv and like they respect it a lot of the times. As for the old what will the players do questions, I think that I give like, because okay, I learned my lesson. In the beginning, I was like, what if we draw out 8 factions and then have the players, just kind of do what they want or like pick or something. They got so overwhelmed with the choices that like by the end of the session, because it kind of was just like, ooh, NPC number 1, NPC number 2, NPC number 3, and then I had them all super planned out, super well built, all these NPCs, and everyone was like, I hate everyone you gave me. Can we have something simple? Can we do something nice and fun? And so I was like, all right, whatever. So they literally left my 8 NPCs to go somewhere else entirely because they had a spaceship. And it was really fun. And the game went like really well. It was very thematically appropriate where they went, like all this kind of stuff. It's like the players are on your side. They're not
Yeah.
trying to like ruin the game. It's just that if you try to railroad, if you try to have one specific, like you're not like you can write, but don't be a writer. Don't write the narrative for the players. You have to like put them in situations and places where they find interesting things that you already thought about. Be like, oh my gosh, there's a problem. I wonder who can solve it. And then they'll usually say, we can solve it. We're smart. And that's how you get them.
Yeah. And I think Dungeon World put it well, where draw maps but leave blanks. You don't want to come in with complete picture. You want to specifically leave gaps for the players to fill in. So like when a new player joins my group permanently, I say, okay, what's your character's backstory? Here is the general vibe of what we have going on so far. What do you want to add to it? So like a player just made their character and said, we already have a cleric, so I'm going to remake mine. So now we have detailed lore on what the gladiator pits look like in the capital, because that's where their character comes from. So I'm letting players contribute to the world building in that kind of way, simply because it's there. And players are always going to be more engaged with what they wrote than what you write. No matter how good of a writer you think that you are, the players always are going to love the thing that they touched the most, because that's their part of the world. They love their thing as much as you love yours.
Yeah, I like to interact as a GM kind of as if I was a player as well. Because again, I've been a player for quite a while. And I would think, it's always really nice to feel interacted with and that my storyline is coming to fruition. But at the same time, I play with other people because I like to see how to interact with my fellow players, with my fellow characters. And so now as a GM, it's almost as if I have like a whole arsenal of NPC characters that I can just play around with. And basically my job is just to make sure that the players have people to interact with and people to bounce off of, just like I was doing as a player. And so I have an idea. I have an idea that I'm like, oh, this would be fun for me. And of course, as a GM, you still want to be a part of your game, but at the same time, it's like, of course, your players are going to bring almost tenfold the amount of creativity you put into your own game. And it's really important to listen to what they're saying, because trust me, your game's going to become a lot better for it. And everyone's going to have fun, not just the players, not just you. It's the entire storyline. It comes together when you have multiple people putting all their effort and love into this story.
And again, it's easier to make the players do half the work.
Something that I've also found good is like the improv rule and acting of yes and. When a player is like, I want to do this, you go, yes, and that'll work with something else I'm doing, or yes, and I want to do this and I think it'll work well. Yes, and I can incorporate another player into this. So then that kind of creates a group cohesion, cohesion with your storyline and your game. I think something is also like something to always keep in mind in every part of every game is constant player communication. Check in with your players, ask them, hey, how are you enjoying it? What would you like to see? Are you getting along with the other players? How do you think your characters are getting along? What do you think like their status is right now? And then from there, and this generally I have a lot of players who like drama, sow seeds of chaos. Yes, and their whatever shenanigans they end up to, yes, and whatever drama they're doing between each other. As long as it's not going to lead to actual fighting. Yes, and with consent.
Great. So one more question, I think, before like opening it up is how do you deal with the one problem player? I know the problem player could be like various different things, but how would you deal with a problematic player?
I need to know, guys.
I mean, it really depends on the kind of problem you're having, right? So I think if you look online, you can find a lot of horror stories. People have problem players coming from a lot of different ways.
Player,
I think
but
the most
it's not going to match most people. And
I think Jason is having some mic issues.
Jason's trying to come back.
I believe in him.
Good luck, Jason.
I think generally you can categorize it in either the player is trying to work with you and there's something that's not good and there's something that's not right about it, or the player is like genuinely not a good fit for the table. I think those are the two things you need to be able to differentiate. Because if there's just one problem with the player, like recently I've had an issue with, like, say a player is taking up too much space. They're really into the game and they really like the plot and they love what you're writing, but they're talking all the time and they're taking up too much space from other players. In this instance, it's a problem player, yes, but it's with kind of good intent. So that's solved with like a conversation and then reminding them in game if you see them taking up too much space. This is just like interpersonal communication stuff. If it's a player that's kind of opposed to some fundamental purpose of your game, like say there's somebody who's like, you're trying to run something that's like a nice blend of like some combat here, some like RP, like a bunch of like world building and storytelling over there. And you have one player who's like old fashioned, like murder hobo. Like we got to find stuff and kill people, and just like get loot and get XP and level up. It could just be that player is not looking for the kind of game that you want to run. So I would just recommend talking to them, explain to them basically where you stand and where you see that they stand. If they're willing to compromise and meet you where you're at, then great, they can play. Otherwise, make it clear. There's a lot of other ways they can play role-playing games, a lot of other ways they can play D&D in particular. It doesn't have to be at your table. So players are generally going to want to work with you. Keep that in mind. And if they're not, they're definitely not right for the table. So
Yeah,
Oh,
I totally agree. And I think that there's a lot of different subcategories within that. Like the exact issue that you have will be different. But I think the first step, no matter what, is always have a conversation with that player one-on-one, because if you come at them with the entire group there, it can feel like an attack very, very easily. And if you are doing it in text, especially, you need to be very careful about how your message could be perceived, because as a GM, you are likely seen as an authority figure. And if an authority figure says, this is a problem from you, they are going to likely view that as an attack from an authority figure or get hostile or something. So it's usually good to make sure that if you do need to do it via text, because like stuff happens, it's really hard to get people into a call to break bad news to them because that's weird. And there might not be that many times you see these people outside of club. So doing it via text is a realistic thing that might need to happen. Make sure that message is worded as, I'm not sure if there's a disconnect here, or put the blame on something that isn't them personally. That's really what I wanted to say. I think I got there in a roundabout way.
I think. Oh my gosh, no double. Nice. Okay. So my opinions here. I have two like opposite pendulum opinions and like advice here. So just hear me out. First we're gonna go to the most bad. Personally, I've not had like a problem player that I have not been able to deal with, at least in Dragon, with adults. Sometimes you get like I have little siblings and stuff, so yes, my little siblings are all problem players. And I've learned how to deal with them, and it does take like, I think that the most important bit here is that for like the true like pinnacle of problem player, which I'm gonna define here as, because I think definitions are kind of important.
Mhm.
Like I think there's a difference between problem player and then like indecency, or like specifically like being aggressive, or like saying like saying things that aren't allowed to, like just like generally like, because I don't, we're recording here, so I don't want to say anything, but anything
Yeah.
specific. We get the idea. Like things that are really untoward, if you know what that word means. Um, so like for those people, especially through the club, I think we do have some resources that I helped set up over the summer, and we helped set up as the leadership. But if we need to like bolster those up, we can. But if it's through the club, you just have to like say like, look, this is against club policy, it's against school policy. Like you're gonna deal with the people that aren't me, because like sure you're an authority figure, but you're running a game for Dragon. You like it's
Yeah.
so yeah, go through the proper channels always, especially if it's something that is like aggressive, or like really uncomfortable, or like sexual in nature or stuff like that. Otherwise, I think that defining problem, or like a problem player, is kind of very, very important, because on the other side of things, oftentimes I feel like, especially with like YouTube and social media, a problem player is anyone who you're slightly annoyed with, which is not really like, it's not, you don't have to go through all these like million steps to like fix the problem player, when it's really just like you just you gotta be a little bit more clear. You gotta tell them like, hey, this isn't how I want to do things here at this table. For me, I kind of prevent problem player situations by being very clear with how I feel about things happening, like on the spot. Because like I'll say, like I have like a rules lawyer kind of guy in my game right now. Um, I'll be like, look, you're annoying, but like you're right, so we're gonna leave it be, and he like takes it as a joke, and everyone's happy. Because like yeah, because sometimes he's a little annoying, but like I don't like hate him. It's just he just breaks it, like breaks my concentration, and being like, hey, there's something specific here. So yeah, it's not really like a problem. It's just something that's not great. Um, but I think yeah, communication's the best way to go. Preventing the problem from being a real problem is probably the best. Like address things early, and session zeros are the most important thing. Um,
And
oh, that's interesting actually. But yeah, that's about all I had to say. Oh yeah, session zero. That's the other thing. Session zeros are super important. We should probably have a conversation about that.
we should. And I think that also in session zero, you should have a section for safety tools like the X card. And how many of you have heard of an X card? Just show of hands. Yeah. So basically the idea is you introduce that this card is, if you have a problem in the game, if anybody's making you uncomfortable for any reason, you point at or lift up the card and the scene ends, no questions asked. And that is just there as a safe release valve for if somebody's doing something really uncomfortable, you as the GM could call X card on them. Other players involved could call X card for any reason. And particularly if you're running a game with darker themes, like you're starting to get into horror, or you're starting to get into topics of specific kinds of death or things of that nature, having one of these on the table lets you engage with those safely. And if players are uncomfortable for the point where they just don't really want to be around it, they can then pull this. And this, as a GM, makes me much more comfortable in tackling those darker topics, and knowing that I'm not putting actual real people that I know in harm's way for the sake of my artistic liberty or something. I highly recommend you look up how to use this X card. I'm going to actually put a link to it in chat if that's fine with everybody, so that you can read up on the best ways to introduce and all that kind of stuff. Because there's a lot of theory behind it, but that's the rough outline of it.
I used to say that I would say I'd like to roll a mental health check, please. Basically, it was just a sign. Same thing as the X card, but kind of trying to stay with it. But I like the X card too.
Yeah, it's very visual of what it is. And it has everybody get on the same page. And even just introducing it has a lot of people think about what kinds of things they'd want to not see in the game, which is also a very important step. And there's the link in the doc.
I will say I've had a couple of experiences as a GM with players who have made me genuinely uncomfortable. And I found that it's, first of all, if it's in the moment and you are genuinely like freaked out, say, I gotta pause the game. Say, I gotta stop for a second. Make that clear. If you don't realize it in the moment and you're thinking about it, talk to someone, talk to somebody outside of the group. Ask them what they think, get some advice, just like if somebody creeped you out in real life, or outside of the game. Also something that I've learned is that if you are genuinely uncomfortable, your other players are also probably going to be uncomfortable, and you should talk to them about how they feel as well. It's really, communication is always key, and making sure to be clear about that kind of stuff as well. And make sure it doesn't turn into like gossip. Don't be like, so this happens, like to one of the players. I mean, call everyone, or like that, form a meeting, or like just send like a group text and be like, hey, I'm currently feeling like this because of this, this, and this. Is anyone else feeling that way? Please let me know. Because yeah, it when you're a DM, it can feel like it's your responsibility to make sure everyone has fun or everyone feels safe. But it's important to remember that, like, you know, you're a person too. And you know, this is a game. This isn't, you aren't trained for it. So yeah.
A good game will have everyone feeling safe and having fun at the same time. We're slaughtering monsters in the game, not on the table.
It feels worth noting, especially since this is for new GMs, that sorry, don't invite strangers to your home until you trust them. You know, don't meet people in parking lots after dark. Even though they're ostensibly role players, you still should do basic human safety.
Of course. Yeah.
All right, that just about wraps up that question. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat and then we'll read them out so that way it's not just chaos. And I suppose while we're just waiting for questions, if there is no questions at all, which is completely fine, is there any other like general tips you would like to give for first-time DMs for anything?
I got one. Just like this is just like stuff that you can do during prep. If you have the option to make some kind of like music or playlist, I think that really helps for ambiance. I was not doing it for like a few years. I played in games for many years. I didn't have music. When I saw it, when I got a taste of it for the first time. I was like, it really changes like the nature of the game. You can add a lot of tension with the right music. You can add a lot, like a sense of like peace or tranquility with the right music. You don't have to put that much time into it. Get like one or two songs that you can switch through. It can add a lot. And also something I've started doing is using visual aids. So if you can, try to get like a picture of like some important figure, a monster that somebody's fighting. It can help bring the whole thing alive. If you're using like a battle map or something, you have little minis, that helps a lot too. But in absence of this, if you're just doing theater of the mind, a little like picture can go a long way.
It's now we can get AI to do that stuff. It's kind of revolutionary, even though, you know, it has weird things for content creators and all that.
I'm gonna answer one of the questions because I think that's fun. Let's see. We're gonna skip that first one. I don't really use pre-gen, but I also do 5th edition, so it's a lot easier to get resources, so I can't really answer that one. Other systems, especially if you're doing Dune, you're gonna probably want to do pre-gen. Like pre-made characters are the best for when you have a game system that not everybody knows.
Yeah. And that's why for me in Pathfinder, where I'm introducing new players and planning the drop-ins, I have 10 pre-gens made.
Someone was talking about how to introduce people who are like completely new to the game. So when I had my first ever GM session, it was also with new players. So a lot of forgiveness in that area. Oh, speaking of which, that's another thing. Your players probably won't know when you mess up. Don't tell them you messed up. Like
Until after.
right. No, not even until after. Because to be honest, I did that. I would tell them after. I'd be like, oh, sorry, I messed up at this point. And they're like, you did? Oh, and it kind of ruined the magic for them. So to be honest, I just kind of bury it in my secrets and keep it till I die. But for people who are completely new to the game, since you're also a new GM, you're just basically learning alongside them. Typically, again, they're probably going to come to you as like, how do I play? What are the rules? Where do I go? So it really would help if you knew the rules of your game. Either, again, you're looking at D&D 5e or perhaps a Pathfinder or some other RPG rule set. It helps to know those rules so that when they ask, you know. Google searches are also really easy, just to go like, hey, D&D 5e, what are the rules in combat? Things like that. Just so that they can talk to you and then you can talk to them. You basically confirm what you're going to be doing the next few sessions. Rules, stories, and all. It's much easier when you're talking together.
There was some mention earlier of yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Come back to me.
I love answering questions. We love answering questions. I just wanted to get Ryan's because you know it's preference. I know him. Anyways, so should you allow your players to do what they want, even if it means you go unprepared into a session? That is a very complicated question to answer or for me at least, because in an extent, like to an extent, if you know the world, if you know where your players are, which I mean, you're running the game, I hope you know where they are. But I mean, even throwing them into somewhere random would be funny, but that's off topic. So, but like if you know where they are, if you know where like everything is, and you know the world, you are like 75% of the way to the game happening. So like the only thing you need left is like if there's like a combat or like a situation or like a detective story, like all that kind of stuff, that's where things start to get like, oh well, I'm not prepared. But like I think the best thing to do is to establish at the very beginning what kind of game it is. If it is I'm gonna improv this game, everybody, so you can do what you want and I'm okay with it, then that's cool. For it, like, you know, for this game that I'm running right now, it's like a bounty board game. Like you start in a town, we have a downtime, and then they take they go to the bounty board and they pick like what mission they want to do of the ones I have, like, you know, they're there and like things they can do. They can still talk to NPCs and all that kind of stuff, but like the fighting, like, you know, the things I need to prepare, I have prepared, and that's their options. That's what they do. But you know, like it is harder to prep a sandbox game. If that's what you want to do though, and you know, you just have to prepare for being unprepared, really. So, you know, take that as you will. But
And I should also mention, you as the GM are a player. If you're not comfortable going somewhere, guess where they're not going. Because like I think that does get lost in a lot of these conversations, is you are still a player, your fun still matters.
Anyway, I remember what I was thinking about in the new player section, which is that came up earlier of just getting people over the initial hurdle of being a little nervous about, you know, so I can do anything, I can just say anything and it happens. And that kind of goes to the new question that came up going off the new players, and it keeps scrolling. Should I encourage them to role play? How do I ease the initial awkwardness of a first session? And yeah, you do want to be somewhere in the middle of, if you just kind of lay out a setting and then say, okay, you can do anything, people are just, I don't have any motivation of what to do. So what I try to do, if I remember to, is just to ask open-ended questions, but not too open-ended. For example, like if you set up a situation where they need to track bandits through the forest, you just, okay, establish the end goal is tracking the bandits through the forest. You're going to find their hideout as long as things go well. How would you do that? And just like they say, constraint breeds creativity. So ask them questions, but within kind of a pretty narrow section of what they need to decide to do. They've got their characters and they have the skills to do it. It's just, how are you going to apply that?
I think the Pathfinder Beginner Box is really good at this because it says you've already taken this job to go clear out this area of all the things that problem it. You are in the basement. Go ahead and describe how your characters are looking around.
Yeah, it's good.
So like I like that kind of intro compared to Lost Minds Fandel, which is the D&D starter set thing, where all your characters are on a card and they're all told introduce yourselves, role play with each other. That is a very hard opening for brand new players.
Adding on to that, number one, absolutely encourage them to role play. Not only role playing gets them super invested in the world and each other, and that's what you want to see with your players, but also giving them something to interact with. Like you're in a tavern. Instead, do something. You're in a tavern and you're currently talking with the barkeeper who seems like kind of a scraggly fellow. What are you saying? How do you look? What are you ordering? I think that helps characterizes everyone, and then that also encourages them because players will be like, oh, that's related to my backstory, or oh, I'm just curious to see what that guy's up to. And then they just start talking, and before you know it, 2 hours have gone by and you haven't done much. And honestly, best part of the game.
I personally have also seen like trying to encourage it by like rewarding the players directly for like role playing, such as giving inspiration. Like, okay, you did some interaction. Here's like a D4 inspiration die or something like that. That can also probably help out and giving like an incentive to like interact with others.
I think Jessica had a question. I mean, if you want to,
Yeah.
Yeah, sick.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm the Dune person. All the messages and the secret tests, that's me. It's important. But like my main thing is that Dune is a pre-established world with like pre-established things. It's actually pretty divisive. It's pretty like anti-religion themes, anti-religion, stuff like that. And I am hoping that my players like understand that, because I can't change certain things about the world just because I can't make like Dune be support religion, because that's the source material necessarily support religion. I can't make the story support charismatic figures. I can't get, because like the source material won't allow me to do it. How do I deal with like players wanting to like deviate from the source material when the source material is kind of like not particularly, and not deviant, it's a bit divisive, I should say. So I still have to maintain like the integrity of the story while having to like deal with players who might not get that. That's my main worry.
So a few things. So is this a pre-made world or is it a pre-made adventure?
It's a world. It's a universe.
Okay, it's a universe. Okay, and then are you completely opposed to any change?
I'm not. I like the world because part of the reason why I'm doing the story is because I like the themes, the messages.
Yeah.
I'm not totally against anything. I'm worried that some people will be.
Okay, yeah, because like I'm building off a world of Eberron. It's kind of like a steampunky thing. And I do want to keep that idea throughout that. But there was a certain time when one of my players wanted to worship like the god of Tur. It's one of the Greek gods. And even though I didn't have a god or a religion in that world that specifically was named Tur, I was like, okay, well, there still seems to be a similar enough like religion, a similar enough enclave, some sort of cult that follows a similar god. So I'm just going to rename them to follow the god Tur, and it still has the same storyline, it still has the same message, but there is still, it's just a name change essentially. Or I think you were talking about how like there was one of your players
like pretty strong anti-religious themes, and like
well then in that case what you could do is that perhaps this character is being almost stigmatized, as if like,
Yeah.
why would you have faith in a almighty being? That's stupid. That's dumb. And so basically, maybe that's more like a backstory thing. See, and that's what I mean is, yeah, you're right. There is like restrictions in this world, and there is something that this anti-religious theme that you're trying to do. Keep at it. And
like
no,
I'm trying
like
to do. It's more of like it's embedded in the story, so I can't ignore it.
right. And don't get me wrong, it's a very, just like how religion can be used to like push forward stories, anti-religion is the same exact way. And if anything, it's almost as if including that kind of
Makes the
spark-
anti-religion more real to the
Yeah.
players because they're interacting with it now.
Yeah. Thank you for putting it. Anyone else want to jump in on this?
I also want to jump in on this and say that is the type of thing you definitely go over in session 0. Because if somebody wants to play a happy-go-lucky religious character, and then you hit them with the, oh, you're actually being hunted because nobody likes you, that's going to cause a lot of ruffled feathers very quickly and very rightfully.
Yeah.
So just be very clear of, this is the type of world it is during session 0. And if somebody still opts to play a religious character, well, if you have the safety tools that if they ever feel uncomfortable, they can let you know easily. And they know they're in an environment that it is safe to say, hey, I'm not comfortable going through with this. Then, hey, all good.
Right.
But-
You're not telling them no, you're just giving them more
because
ideas, really.
I basically have to say when it comes to some religions, like it's fake.
Yeah.
And
And And I think that some players might say that's kind of a deal breaker for me and then move on. And I think that's also a thing that you need to be fine with. It just means that you're not compatible in the same gaming group, and that's fine. That happens.
Okay.
Yeah, I can sense that Dune and the Dune lore are really important to you. So maybe you do need to find a place, a hole in the story,
Yeah, I mean,
situation, a conflict that was never really covered. And
I know, it's just, I know, like, I'll have to deal with, like, finding a good middle ground. It's just, I'm trying to deal with, like, oh, I want to support the story, in its themes, what it stands for, but at the same time, realizing that, like, some people won't entirely believe in that, so I'm just have to find that balance.
Well, yeah, like I think Sean was saying, is just like, especially in session 0, it would be really, or basically session 0, by the way, if no one knows what that means, it's essentially an established meeting time designated just for talking about characters and the storyline and the world and basically where we want to go with this
also
game.
player expectations of what kinds of things they should do to prepare for a session, what kinds of things you are likely to be going over, themes that are common, that kind of thing.
Right.
I like to also throw in like the types of triggers that might be present, because like if I'm going to be running a Spider Tomb game, I'll definitely let people know, by the way, it's going to be really hard for me to end up the spiders in my Spider Tomb game, so if you have severe arachnophobia, this won't be a game for you.
Right. And so session 0 would basically be a way to say like, hey, I really like this Doom story because of these sort of story themes. And again, by saying that, you are going to inspire your players to create characters that will most likely fit into that Doom story. They'll go like, oh, okay, so there is anti-religious tones, but that means maybe I could sneak in this kind of like rebellious religious fighter. Again, I'm not one of your players, but if you were to talk to them, I'm sure you would be able to work something out.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
I don't know. I had one more thing to add on to that. Listen to you guys. I think you guys basically said everything I want to say. But I think if you're concerned about the way that a player might fit into the story, if they're filling like conventional roles that are in the narrative, right? Because the issue is you're worried that you're gonna have players that are trying to take on roles that the story is supposed to be warning against, right? That sort of thing. I think it could be good to try to think about it like from the other angle, like how, if a player was in that role, what would a story for them look like? And is that a reasonable thing to give a player? If not, maybe they just can't play that role whatsoever. But the people are saying like religious persecution, that sort of thing. If like if there you were saying what was the other thing? There was something about like charismatic characters, something like that.
Yeah, basically, main thing of the Dune series, it talks about how strong leadership and it's about manipulation, basically. Some people might not like that because it's used to religion that manipulates people,
Right.
leaders manipulate people, power manipulates people, it's about manipulation. And I'm just like, I want to explore those themes and explore them well at the same but like I don't want to like lose that feminine fabric of the story just because my parents. Like I get like the comfort level and everything, but like I don't want to at the same time I don't want to like
well, I mean, if you discuss it with them, I would definitely stick to that stuff. If the story is about how, if you want to have a story where religion is problematic, and if you're too charismatic or too much of a leader, it leads like a corruption, a bunch of these issues, have characters who encounter that sort of thing run up against the problems that creates. That's going to be like a very direct demonstration. Those characters are then going to grow and change in response to those themes that you think are really important about the story. There's this is kind of a anecdotal example, but that this thing back here all across my room is a bunch of Dark Sun posters, which is like, this is just like an older campaign setting for D&D. It's like a whole world. It's kind of Dune inspired. It's like post-apocalyptic, sand everywhere, and arcane magic has like ruined the land basically, because it has to take energy from the world around it, like the natural world. So as a result, it's kind of a warning against like abuse of power. It's the reason why it's called Dark Sun. The sun has been like, a bunch of energy has been drained from it, and it's a dying star at this point from the abuse of arcane power. So wizards are kind of scorned for that reason. They're seen as like tyrants and petty and thieves. If a player wants to play a wizard, they're going to encounter these problems, like the problems of like this constant greed for power that exists within the world. So I think a similar thing could probably happen within Dune, but within like the Dunoverse. I don't know. I don't know what to call it, but yeah.
I hate to interject, but I got word in the Discord the meeting might end at, it says like 9:15. And we will likely just get kicked off instantly. So I don't know how, I'm not in charge of this, so I'm gonna shut up.
Yeah,
think it's going
Zoom
okay
like
right
free
now,
versus
though.
Zoom premium. Yep, that's a thing.
I think it's going okay for now, so we could keep going because I don't see any countdown timer or anything like that that's saying we're gonna be kicked out. So I think no. So I think we should be fine. And since I
Okay.
think we wrapped up about that problem, unless you want to keep,
yeah, no, that's good. I'm good. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So, any last like general tips?
I have one. Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I'll just go real quick. If you're running Everon, no, I'm just kidding. Okay. World building, general. I think people go so hard on world building, and I love those people, and I am one of those people. But like, my opinion and my what I do about it is I write my own little short stories and stuff in the world because like I love the world that I'm building and that kind of stuff. But you have to get out the like, I want my world to look like this before it starts. Like, because I mean the world looks like something, but I'll write like backstory story and like all this kind of stuff because like the players are going to come in and they're going to do things, and it is no longer your world. Like as soon as they step in, it is no longer your world. So like if you really are super attached to it, like write your own little stories, write backstory, write like post story, all this kind of stuff. But you gotta let them have it. That's all I'm
Now, as to say, just experience on both sides of this table is important. When you're a GM, run games that you'd want to see happen as a player. When you're a player, contribute to the story as you would want, as you would a GM, as you would if you were a GM, you would want a player to be that player. That got away from me a little.
I've got one more Jacob Walker patent pending, like different way to do rules. I really enjoy my players rolling a lot more than me. I think it takes some burden off of me and gives my players, they feel like they have more agency. If they're rolling the dice, it feels like they're actually doing the thing. And one way, at least in combats, that I've managed to get my players to roll more is with an active defense thing. You can find it just like with some Googling, but basically have players roll to defend. Don't have monsters roll. You can experiment with not having monsters like roll to attack them. You take their AC, if it's like their AC is like 10 plus whatever their armor is, subtract 10 from it and have them roll with the remaining value as their bonus to defend. I really enjoyed it. It leaves the option for perfect defense. They can get like a nat 20 or something on a defense check, and you get to decide how that goes. And then also nat ones are still they still get critical hit, so that's like still an option. Oh, I still roll for damage. I see I see you say that, but that stuff is great. Yeah, no, I never stop rolling for damage. I love rolling for damage in front of the players and then calculating it. That's like absolutely excellent. But if you give them the chance to feel like they're defending themselves, that it adds more drama to it somehow, and it's less stressful for me. So
I would highly recommend you check out Dungeon World, because like all your homebrews bring the game closer to Dungeon World's philosophy
maybe so. It's
and further away from D&D 5e. So like I'd highly recommend checking it out.
It's a lot of stuff that I've gotten just from looking at like OSR type things. A lot of different systems all combined.
That checks out, because that's also the Morkborg approach to things. Yeah. Yeah, that's exact. All your homebrews are exactly like Morkborg rules. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm biased. Somehow I played Pathfinder for like a decade and ended up just wanting to do OSR stuff. But
I mean, that's fair. OSR stuff does kind of go hard.
I mean, sometimes it's nice to just kind of like roll a little bit ahead. So sometimes when my players are describing an attack or something, I'll be like, okay, and I'll just be kind of rolling their my monster's next attacks, and so I can immediately spring back with, okay, it's gonna try to attack you, but then it swings and it misses or something like that. Also, okay, this is for GMs only. Okay, anyone else get out? But I like to just kind of randomly roll a dice or two and kind of go like, or just something like that. And I'm telling you, it's the perfect thing. It is the perfect thing. I'll maybe have one or two players look at me kind of like, oh God, what was that?
Oh.
And it was nothing. It was genuinely nothing. It was just rolling the dice to make me happy.
This is probably my favorite Pathfinder rule, and it's the secret check. Whenever somebody makes a perception check to look for something, tries to hide, lies to an NPC, the GM rolls it behind their screen. You don't get to know what you rolled. You don't know if you lied well. I know. You don't. The NPC just reacts the way they would. Good luck trusting anything anymore in any politics game.
That's fun. I really like that.
Secret checks are so good, and just like some activities have the secret trait, like recalling knowledge on something, secret.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, dude.
Insight checks are secret, and if they get a natural one and critically fail, you lie to their face.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
that actually helps. That's a good solution.
Because you can misremember, you can pick up on facial cues that aren't there. It's rough.
I've got a political like intrigue, intense character secret backstory, like or players
as soon as you
stealing that absolutely.
As soon as you tell a player, oh, what's your modifier for deception? I noted the result. Okay, moving on, he does. And then you have them go along with it as if they were telling the truth, and the player does not know what to think anymore. And then they're going to be asking for perception checks or insights to try and figure out if they figured it out. And then you continue rolling behind the screen. It implements that paranoia instantly. Because lying should not be a stress-free activity in these games, I think. And it puts player mentality and character mentality closer together. It creates some very, very spicy moments at the table. Highly recommend.
I would say my last piece of advice, it would be to incorporate character backstory into your main story, because that will be an easy way to get your players invested in the story that you've got going on. And also, one more, if you think that if you've communicated with your players and you set up your session 0 and everyone's chill, don't ever think that you're going, like, don't be like, am I paying a little bit too much attention to this character by giving them a highly dramatic, horrible thing for that to happen to the character, like run into their undead, their brother come back from the dead, like something dramatic like that? Do it. Just throw it at them and see what happens next.
Just remember the X card.
Yeah, remember the X card. Remember player boundaries, of course, but if you communicated, it's all good. Throw it at them.
Can I go back like just half a topic? Because I just put some stuff in the chat and I realized I should probably explain it a little bit. So the concept of secret roles and secret like things, like the behind the DM screen stuff, I personally abuse it. Why? Because I'm mean. But mostly because like
You feel you know
am-
what a good story is, right?
like, yeah, I'm okay. That's what I was about to get to. Thank you. I'm dramatic. That's what I was about to say. I like the thing I hate the most is a monster failing a save in the beginning of a combat. If you don't know, in D&D 5th edition, there are saving throws. So, like for instance, like something that actually happened. Wizard casts web, 20-foot radius, restrains the monsters inside if they're inside. Of course he's a power gamer. We love him, but also, oh my God. And and so like, half of them are now restrained. And I'm like, this isn't very tense and awesome. They got ambushed by kobolds. They should be being run down and murdered. But no, all the kobolds are stuck in a web, and it's sad. So sometimes I don't even care. Sometimes I roll a 1 on a save at the beginning of an encounter. I'll just be like, that's actually not a 1. And then as far as the players know, I just roll really well. So
And
that's kind of where I'm at.
I do think that's a D&D spells issue rather than the game thing. In Pathfinder, I found that me just fully doing the dice exactly as they work tells a much better story than me fudging anything. But I did have to fudge all the time when I ran 5e, and I admit
yeah.
that.
Yeah, never let them know your next move. Never let them know your next move.
Oh,
No,
also, this is a Pathfinder rule I'd highly recommend stealing in the D&D games. It's a way for you to track how much different factions like your players. And it can very easily be twisted to be a D&D subsystem as well. This is basically how they do like guild membership in the Ravnica book. So, yeah.
That's in the DMG, dog. Straight word for word. Oh man. Okay.
Yeah, just to build off of what Merrick said, when I did my very first like campaign, I was doing Mines of Phandelver, and for whatever reason, my players found the final boss extremely easy because I kept rolling so bad, and they defeated the final boss so easily. The characters that did the most damage to them was a group of lemon goblins that they encountered by chance on the side of the road, which is the inspiration for the whole lemon one shot. Because they were just like, no, we wanted those lemons. And number 2 was the roof falling down on them because they tried to steal a cursed gem off a statue. So I definitely felt like that rule definitely would have helped just in hindsight.
Never let them know your next move. Oh, it's so funny. Oh man. No, I was gonna oh God. I'm so funny, I forgot what I was gonna say. Okay. Oh well.
And I think the final question is just the one by Roger, was like, how do you run online sessions? He said he wants to run a first one, but it feels like half of the mood is lost without the body language. And I know some of you sort of like partially answered that, but I feel like we could probably go through that as the final question.
I feel like I have a good amount of experience running online games because I ran a lot of online games during the pandemic. And my advice is you can't set mood via body language. So there are ways you can compensate for that, either with like art choice for the maps or music. I think music is an easy one that sets a lot of mood very easily, and players can just volume themselves on their end. And I think that is a great way to set tone. Because like sometimes I'd have like an overly dramatic thing for when a specific villain would show up. So that way, as soon as they start hear that song playing, go, oh god damn it. And like that was just kind of like a moment we all could have. In the same way, in person, if you just kind of like get the body language and you pull out the specific book that they know the stat block's in, it's that same kind of vibe. And there are ways you can mimic those vibes through other ways. You just need to be looking out for those. And I think that's really what separates good from great online games.
What kind of things did you, what were your tools?
For me, in most of my pandemic games, I was running on Roll20. However, Roll20's Pathfinder implementation is poo-poo, to put it lightly. So I started running in Foundry instead, and Foundry has a lot stronger tools to do a lot of things. So Foundry will even like animate the dice going across the screen to animate the same for everybody. So we all still have the experience of, ooh, is it gonna land 8? Nope, lands on the 18. And we all have that kind of experience together still, which I think is a big important part of the tabletop gaming play style. It lets me do things like you can hover over a character token to have like the image appear on the bottom left. I can disable that if I wanted to. It has a wide variety of different things you do for pings. It lets you configure all your game settings. It has all the Pathfinder rules right there. So I just import the creature, set some art for it, and I'm done. It has a lot of very nice features. I know its 5e implementation isn't that great because of how 5e does a lot of its licensing. However, a lot of my stuff is I'd recommend figuring out how the music player of whatever virtual tabletop you're using works, or finding some way to play music for everyone. Because that was like the one thing that really elevated my online games up that next tier. That's probably the biggest single thing that I did that I really, really liked.
I think everyone's questions have been answered. I think this wraps up this panel. Thank you everyone so much for helping out and also asking questions, answering them. Thank you so much.
Yay.
Everyone,
Yay.
thank you.
We
Oh,
simply
wait,
must
where
do
can-
this again sometime.
Thanks for having me.
We should do that. Where are we gonna get the recording? Because this is recorded. Tell
Yeah,
them
I think
about
I
it.
did it on my computer, so it'll be on my computer and I'll probably upload it onto YouTube or something.
Ooh,
Okay,
there should be a dragon YouTube channel.
Ooh, we'll see about that. Well, thank you everyone. I'm gonna
This is a
end
lot
this
of
Zoom
fun.
meeting now.
Have a nice night, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See you next time.
Next time we do something like this.